Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode, we're doing Who Was Better. The subjects for this Who Was Better: the American Dream Dusty Rhodes and the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Two men who had one of the biggest feuds in wrestling history. Two men that probably land on everybody's top 10 list anywhere in wrestling history as well. So we're going to rank them, see who was actually better. Now for this, we have 8 separate categories. Each category is graded on a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. At the end, we're going to total up all of their points. Whoever has the highest total wins. There is a chance for bonus points, which was something that was voted on by the viewers out there. So with that being said, we're going to jump right into it. For technical wrestling ability, your bell-to-bell matchup, starting with Dusty Rhodes. I'm giving Dusty a 3 on this. I wouldn't say that Dusty is bad, but it's not what he's remembered for. This would be kind of similar to where Steve Austin would fall, where he had great matches and he had great ability, but a lot of times it didn't call for it, and a lot of times he was just a brawler, which is where Dusty excelled, Steve Austin as well. For that, Dusty gets a 3. For technical ability for Ric Flair, Ric's getting a 5. I've heard some criticism that Flair has the same match basically every time he goes out there, which I think is somewhat valid, but you could say the same thing for a lot of the big stars, whether it be Bret Hart, Ric Flair, other guys like The Rock, Hulk Hogan, Steve Austin, Undertaker even. You could say they had basically the same match every time. It doesn't mean that he wasn't highly skilled at it. And when I think about my top matches of all time, my top in-ring matches, Ric Flair is up there several times. I mean, he's probably got 5 matches in my top 20 matches of all time. So for that, Ric gets a 5. Next category, striking. For Dusty, Dusty's going to get a 5 on this. I mean, like I just mentioned, he was a prolific brawler. The bionic elbow was such a kill shot that it adds so much to this. He's absolutely perfect here. This is where he excelled. This is where he brought the drama. This is where Dusty stood out. For Ric Flair, Flair's going to get a 4. Woo! And I promise I won't do the woo every time I put up the 4. It just kind of felt right. When you think about striking and you think of Flair, you think of the chops. There are some other elements of it, and a 4 is a great score, don't get me wrong. But there are times when Ric would get into his punching and his kicks and it looked a little bit on the weaker side. For that, I had to knock just a bit off. He's still very proficient at it. He's still adept, and he's still Ric Flair, one of the greatest in-ring talents of all time. Next category, how they performed as a heel. Now, I'm going to preface Dusty's score by saying I haven't seen much of him as a heel in the 70s in Florida Championship Wrestling, mostly because a lot of that is lost to time. From what I did see, he did well. So this might be kind of an incomplete grade for him. I'm mainly grading him on his heel turn with the NWO and what little I have seen of that time. So for that, his NWO turn was not great because at that point, no one in the world ever wanted to see Dusty Rhodes as a heel. For the little bit I did see of Florida, I did think it was good. I just haven't seen it in context to give it more than that. So I'm going to give him a baseline 3. Basically, an incomplete on my end, because I haven't seen his best heel work in a week-to-week basis, if that makes sense. Now for Ric Flair, Ric's getting a 5. I mean, he's one of the greatest heels of all time, one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. Basically, during the 80s, Jim Crockett Promotions strapped a rocket to his back, and their biggest stories were all tied into Ric Flair, and Ric Flair most of that time was a heel, so he gets a 5 for that. Just a fantastic heel. Next category, how they perform as a face. Now in this, Dusty's getting a 5. I mean, when you say babyface wrestlers, there are very few people that are in that upper echelon, that Mount Rushmore of all-time great babyfaces. People like him, Hogan in the 80s, Bruno in the 70s, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat through his whole career. He is an upper echelon babyface, one of the greatest babyfaces of all time, gets a 5. For Ric, I'm giving Ric a 4. Not saying that he wasn't great at it, because he was, but to me the times that Ric Flair was a face, he wasn't necessarily the focus of the company. Whereas when when Dusty was a face, and I know a lot of times when he was face, he was a booker, Dusty was the face of the company. Rick, when he was a face, felt like he felt more to the background. Like in the early 90s, he felt like he was behind Sting on the babyface roster. In the late 90s, he felt like he was behind Goldberg and Sting again and DDP. So while he was really good, he was never as impactful as Dusty as a babyface. So he gets a 4 in that category. Next up is promos, and you could probably guess it just by looking at their names. 2 of probably the top 5 promo guys of all time. They both get a 5 here. I mean, how can you not give these guys a 5 at promos? I mean, it's Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair. 2 of the legendary promo men in wrestling, whether it be the Hard Times promo, whether it be Ric Flair talking about Space Mountain, or anything in between. These guys are the pinnacle. This is what you strive for in pro wrestling. You'd be hard-pressed to find 2 better talkers than these 2. And they may be the 2 best. And as I'm talking, you may hear that outside it sounds like my neighbors are doing some lawn work right in the middle of the video, so if you hear that in the background, I do apologize. Next up is presentation. Basically, this is their music, their ring attire, their robes, their entrances. Again, I gotta give both of these guys a 5. While Dusty may not have been as flashy as Ric Flair towards his entrances, Ric Flair, again, the $20,000 robe, the 2001 theme music, he's Ric Flair. But Dusty fit his presentation so well. There are very few wrestlers that are connected to their character as much as Dusty Rhodes is to that common man character, to that son of a plumber, to that guy that would come out in jeans and a t-shirt and beat you up with a bandana wrapped around his neck. Dusty was your blue-collar guy, and he fit that so perfectly. Both of them get a 5 on presentation. They're both out of this world with that. Next up, charisma. As you may guess, we're going to go down the same road again. This is getting to be very repetitive. Both men are getting a 5 here. Again, it is Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair. The charisma is through the ceiling with both of these guys. Any room they walk into, any moment they walk into, they're automatically the center of attention. Much like I said with promos, these are 2 of the top guys as far as charisma of all time. You put in Piper, Savage. I mean, it's hard to get to this level. There are very few wrestlers that get to be on the Dusty Rhodes, Ric Flair level, charisma-wise. Next up, how they perform in big game situations. Now, what this is like your Starrcade main event, your WrestleMania main event, your headlining pay-per-views, your headlining house shows. Any time where the success of a specific show is depending on you and the performance you give. Again, for the 4th category in a row, both men get a 5. I mean, I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. This is Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair, 2 of the 5 best wrestlers of all time. How can you not give them a 5? There are so many matches, like I said, with Flair. Dusty is also in a lot of my favorite matches of all time. Whether it be the I Quit match with Tully Blanchard, his massive feuds with Ric Flair, his bull rope match versus Steve Corino, one of his later career awesome matches. I mean, Flair's got everything on there as well. Flair with the Funk I Quit match, the Steamboat Series against Dusty. I mean, both these guys are the cream of the crop, and you can't really put anyone much higher than these guys when it comes to big game performers. Now, with that, let's go to our totals. For Dusty Rhodes totaled at 36. For Ric Flair totaled at 38. Now, with the bonus points, which to get bonus points, there is going to be every week. Basically, there'll be a question on my community page every week. Every Wednesday, I try to post that. It may be a little bit late this week because I'm running a bit behind due to the holiday and other stuff in my personal life, but I digress. With over 700 votes in, which is wow, thank you so much. It is very awesome that it got that great of a response. Ric Flair won basically 2-1. 66% of the vote, and it may not be exactly that, but with 700 votes, he pretty much got 2/3 of the vote. So Ric Flair gets a bonus 5 points, giving him a total of 43. It doesn't change the outcome here, but it could have. That's why it's so important if you have a favorite in these that you go and vote, because you could change the outcome. With all that being said, Ric Flair wins out. He is the better of the 2, at least according to this. I don't want to argue it too much because these 2 are like I said, two of the top 5 wrestlers of all time. This could have went either way, and I recommend watching both of their careers at any point because they're both amazing. Now for my next one, which again, the question should be out Wednesday, if not Thursday, just keep checking on the community page. Also put cool stuff on there like a wrestling fact of the day, whether it be an interesting wrestler was born on that day, or a match that happened on that day, or something behind the scenes that happened on that day that led to wrestling history. I try to put one of those out every day just to give everybody something a little extra on my page. For next week, I'm going to give you a hint. If you're watching this video before that is up, our next one is going to be with 4 current talents. All 4 are signed to AEW, and I'll just put it to you like this. If you drew me a picture of an old Greek building, it would be what was holding up the roof. So that, with that description, you could probably guess exactly what I'm talking about. So stay tuned, vote on those 4 guys for the next one. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and you've been watching Who Is Better.